Mr. Chan.
Mr. Speaker, sir, let me first thank members who spoke on this bill. Let me first address the comments on the changes to the Election Advertising Act and the Elections Advertising Rules. Mr. Louis Ng and Ms. Sylvia Lim sought clarifications on the amendments pertaining to election advertising. Mr. Ng asked whether there will be a defense for the accused to prove that he or she did not know that the content included election advertising and whether enforcement will take into account the difference in culpability between a layperson who carelessly forwards messages and links to a friend and a political operator looking to influence the elections. The answer to both questions is yes. It is not the intention to penalize unintentional breaches of the election advertising laws. The legislation provides for a defense if a person unknowingly breaches the election advertising rules but takes steps to rectify the breach when he or she becomes aware of it. There is also a defense for persons who breach election advertising rules due to circumstances beyond their control. For example, if the breach was due to sabotage. Ultimately, any defense has to be considered based on the facts of each case. Mr. Ng also asked for clarifications on the difference between authorizing and directing an election advertisement, and Ms. Lim asked for the rationale for naming the individuals and entities who approved the content of the election advertisement, even though they ultimately take instructions from the candidates or political parties. The published by requirements require that election advertising displays the full names of all persons who played an active role in publishing it. Such persons include 1. The person who authorized making available to the general public the election advertising. 2. The person who approved the content in the election advertising. And 3. The person for whom, at whose direction the election advertising was published. For any election advertising, these 3 persons may or may not be the same. Some of these roles may also be played by entities, including marketing firms engaged by candidates or political parties. It is important for the identities of those involved to be set out clearly to ensure accountability and transparency. Let me illustrate with an example. A political party hires a social media influencer for a fee to post election advertising on social media on its candidate's behalf. As required under the law, the candidate must first provide written authorization to the influencer to conduct election activity on his or her behalf. Thereafter, the candidate approves the content prepared by the influencer before the influencer publishes the content on his or her social media account. In this case, the political party is deemed to have directed the influencer to publish the election advertising, while the candidate had approved the contents of the election advertising. Meanwhile, the influencer is deemed to have authorized the publishing of the election advertising since the election advertising was published on his or her social media account. Hence, the full names of the political party, the candidate, and the influencer must be displayed on the social media post. The post should also state that it was paid for by the political party. Mr. Ng also had a question on the meaning of private or domestic communication. As stated in my opening speech, examples of private or domestic communication include sending or forwarding election-related content within a private chat or a closed group with family or a small group of friends. When deciding whether communication is of a private or domestic nature, the returning officer or RO will make a case-by-case assessment, taking into consideration 3 factors. First, the number of individuals in Singapore who are able to access the content. Second, whether there are restrictions to access the content, including whether it is a public or closed group. And third, the relationship between the sender and receiver of the content, for example, whether there are strangers or known to each other. Next, Mr. Ng sought clarification relating to the penalties imposed for breaching the new election advertising requirements, whether individuals will be given an opportunity to rectify breaches of election advertising requirements, and whether the penalties for such breaches are too harsh, since if convicted, a voter may be banned from voting for 7 years. Mr. Speaker, sir, any person who publishes or causes to be published any election advertising during the election period is already required to comply with the published by requirements under existing law. These requirements are there to promote informed voting and to safeguard our elections from external influence. The penalty for not complying with these requirements is thus serious. This has not changed. Let me reiterate that it is not our intention to penalize unintentional breaches of the election advertising laws. In general, individuals who have breached these laws will be notified and given the opportunity to voluntarily rectify the breach. Further enforcement action will be considered only if individuals do not comply. Let me also assure Mr. Ng that any prosecution for such an offence will depend on the facts of the case and will only be instituted with the consent of the public prosecutor. Mr. Giam asked about the kind of election activities allowed in the period from the day the writ of election is issued to nomination day. Political parties and candidates may continue to conduct routine activities as long as they are conducted within the limits of the law. On Mr. Giam's other request on whether former MPs are allowed to hold Meet the People sessions to interact with residents, provide assistance to them, whether grassroots advisors can continue to operate as per normal after the writ is issued, and the candidate handbook, these questions are out of the scope of these bills, and Mr. Giam may wish to file the PQs, and we'll be happy to answer them separately. Ms. Lim asked about the amendment to require the display of posters and banners only in permissible locations and whether all political contestants will be assured of ample space in prime locations. The amendment is merely to set out clearly the permissible locations for the display of posters and banners, such as lampposts and banner structures. These locations will be set out in regulations later. And I'm sure there will be sufficient space for all political parties to do the necessary. Mr. Ng noted that a person in charge of a nursing home may inform the mobile polling team that a visit to a resident or inpatient is forbidden on medical grounds and asked about the safeguards in place to ensure that this is not abused. Sir, I would like to assure Mr. Ng that the mobile polling team will not take the polls of residents or inpatients if there are medical grounds, for example, because they are quarantined or are not able to receive any visitors. This is to safeguard their well-being and safety. For such cases, we will require the production of medical documentation as evidence. On Ms. Lim's questions on voters with some limitations in mental capacity, we will adopt the same approach as that for regular polling stations. That is, before the issuance of ballot paper, the election official will request the voter for his identification document and poll card. If the voter does not respond to the election official's request for his identification document and poll card after a few attempts, the voter will not be issued a ballot paper. If the ballot paper has been issued, but the voter is somehow unable to mark the ballot paper, the election official will seek the agreement of the polling agents present that the voter will be allowed to cast a blank vote. I would also like to assure Ms. Lim that for those who are able to make their way to the special polling station set up in the premises of the nursing homes, the procedures are the same as the regular polling stations. Candidates will be able to send polling agents to the nursing homes to observe that voting continues to be secret and the various procedures are adhered to. Mr. Giam asked whether a voter with disability can request someone who is known and trusted by him to help him vote. Sir, our voters with disabilities are independent and many of them are able to vote on their own. Over the years, ELD has introduced various initiatives to make it easier for them to do so, such as stencils for those who are visually impaired and lap booths for those on wheelchair. If the voter is physically unable to mark the ballot paper, he can request for an election official to assist him. These arrangements have served us well, and we have no plans to change them currently. So let me now address Mr. Ng's question on how the RO will make the assessment to establish a special polling station in a nursing home and to authorize special polling arrangements there. As Mr. Ng rightly noted, the bill sets out various factors that the RO is required to consider. As mentioned in my speech, ELD is piloting this new initiative at selected nursing homes with more than 50 voters for a start. In preparation for the rollout of these new voting arrangements at these nursing homes, ELD has engaged MOH to understand the profiles of their residents and inpatients. ELD also visited these nursing homes to understand their unique context and environment. Let me now address Ms. Lim and Mr. Giam's comments on the amendments to enable the use of counting machines. Let me assure Ms. Lim and Mr. Giam that there are no plans to introduce electronic voting for now, and ELD will continue to use standalone machines that are not connected to the internet. While ELD does not rule out any future solutions that can help enhance our election processes, electronic voting currently requires information on the voter's vote to be retained in the system for audit purpose. This makes it challenging to maintain voting secrecy in the event that an audit has to be done. I would also like to assure Ms. Lim that ELD will consult the political parties as it has done in the past should advancement in technology allows the safe and secure use of electronic voting machines before rolling this out. Mr. Giam may also wish to note that Section 50B of the Parliamentary Elections Act currently sets out the various requirements to be fulfilled before electronic counting machines can be used. These include testing of the system in the presence of candidates and their agents. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me conclude by reiterating the intent behind these bills, which is to update the existing laws to enhance voter accessibility, strengthen trust and confidence in our electoral processes, and ensure that Singapore politics is for Singapore citizens only. ELD has consulted political parties on the key initiatives on the new voting modalities last year in 2022, and these are part of the continuous efforts of ELD to enhance our electoral processes and election administration. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me also touch on a few points that were raised just now. Ms. Lim asked if we are going to pre-screen the electoral roll before we determine the nursing homes to be involved. As to how many people will be eligible to vote in a nursing home will depend on those people who have previously registered. So we do not pre-screen as a procedure those people that pre-registered. But as I explained, during the voting itself, the ELD officials will make the assessment as to whether the person has the mental capacity to conduct the voting itself. And we agree with members that the secrecy and the neutrality of the elections officials are very important. And this is why the current mode is for the ELD officials to conduct this rather than to certify many other individuals who are not ELD officials to help respective individuals. Ms. Lim can also be assured that the randomness of the issuance of ballot paper is the same as any polling station. And you asked whether polling agents can access. I think I've answered that. The answer is yes, to view the processes in the nursing home. And electronic means we have answered that. The counting machines are not connected to the internet. Mr. Gerard Giam asked about whether we can qualify individuals to help the PWDs. As I've explained, I think it's best that we do this in a way that gives us confidence that the officials are cleared, neutral, are impartial in their work, rather than to clear many individuals for respective needs, which we may not have the confidence to say that they are all clear about the processes. With that, Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move, and I urge all members on both sides of the House to give your fullest support to both bills.
Any clarifications? Mr. William.
Speaker, I've got two clarifications for Minister. The first concerns what he mentioned in his main speech, that the Minister's powers to make regulations or adjustments due to disruptive events. All right, I think he mentioned that this is going to be removed from the main act and put into subsidiary legislation for more flexibility. I think if there's a disruptive event. So I have two questions concerning this. First is that, is it the intention that Minister will actually issue subsidiary legislation well ahead of election to cover as many scenarios as possible? And during the election itself, he sort of alluded to the fact that there may be a need to issue some further regulations, for example, transport incident, that was what he mentioned. Does he foresee that since the Minister will be a participant in the election itself, that there will be any issue with the issuance of those sorts of regulations? So that's the first thing about the regulations concerning disruptive events, that most of them will be issued well ahead of election, and during the election itself, it will be limited to extreme exigencies and whether there's any issue with the Minister being a participant in the election, issuing those regulations. And lastly, just a clarification on nursing home voting. Will the ELD be conducting special voter education at the nursing homes to be chosen for the pilot for the reasons which I mentioned earlier?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank Ms. William for her two clarifications. The quick answer to the first one is yes. Of course, the Minister will work with ELD to try to anticipate all the possible contingencies that we have to deal with prior to the elections, because I'm sure you agree with me that during the election period, you are as busy as me. Not the time for us to make new legislation, new regulations at that point in time. Yes, so ELD has a scenario plan, various contingencies, as I've described, and we'll try to put this out as early as possible. On your second question, yes, indeed, we are working closely with the nursing home, not just on the logistic and administrative arrangements, but also as part of our outreach to let the voters that are potentially voting in the nursing home to understand their rights and responsibilities.
Mr. Jerogiam.
Just one clarification for the Minister. I believe he said just now that Section 50B of the PEA allows for the inspection and testing of voting machines and vote counting machines. I can't remember the exact words that he used. However, I believe that Section 50B, subsection 2, actually requires for the inspection and testing of DRE voting machines and direct recording electronic voting equipment. But it does not mention vote counting machines. So can I confirm that vote counting machines will be included in this pre-election audit by the candidates and their polling agents? Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, so the answer is yes. We have done this before. The last election, we used the vote counting machine that is the same as those that the currency exchanges used to count, and that was demonstrated to all the political parties prior to ensure that the accuracy of the system.
Question is that the bill be now read a second time. As many as of the opinion say aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Presidential Elections Amendment Bill.
Mr. Speaker, for the
Ms. Lim?
presidential election bill, as I mentioned earlier, the Workers' Party MPs would like to record abstention on the bill.
So would you like to abstain for this
Yes,
bill?
abstention.
Would you like to record your dissension
Yes.
by standing in place, please?
Abstention, yeah. So can we stand? Abstention.
Technically, you should have stood up before I said that the ayes have it.
I'm sorry, I was a bit slow, Mr. Speaker.
Perhaps you might want
wish to
to raise
abstain
your
for-
dissension later at the third reading instead.
Can we not have it recorded now at the second?
When I declare that the ayes have it and the ayes have it, that has passed,
So,
process-wise.
well, let it be recorded.
Committee stage, what day?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to report that the... Sorry, let me get the words right. Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that Parliament will immediately resolve itself into a committee on the bill now.
The question is that Parliament will immediately resolve itself into a committee on the bill. As many as of the opinion say aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is that clauses 1 to 45 stand part of the bill. As many as of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Bill to be reported. Mr. Chan Chun Sing.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to report that the bill has been considered in committee and agreed to without amendment.
Third reading, what day?
Now, sir, I beg to move that the bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the bill be now read a third time. As many as of the opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, say no.
Speaker, we request our abstention to be recorded.
Let me call on the votes. I think the ayes have it. For those who want to record your dissension, please stand in place.
Abstention, sir.
Abstention. Okay, noted. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Presidential Elections Amendment Bill, Item 5, Parliamentary Elections Amendment Bill, second reading.
Mr. Chan Chun Sing.
Mr. Speaker, sir, on behalf of the Prime Minister, I beg to move that the bill be now read a second time. The Parliamentary Elections Amendment Bill is associated with the previous bill on the order paper, the Presidential Elections Amendment Bill. In the second reading speech for that bill and the debate we have just had, I have explained the main amendments proposed in both bills. Although members have already raised their questions and expressed their views on both bills during the earlier debate, I welcome members to raise any additional questions they may have on the Parliamentary Elections Amendment Bill. Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. As many as of the opinion say aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Parliamentary Elections Amendment Bill.
Committee stage, what day?
Now, sir, I beg to move that Parliament will immediately resolve itself into a committee on the bill.
The question is that Parliament will immediately resolve itself into a committee on the bill. As many as of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is that clauses 1 to 48 stand part of the bill. As many as of the opinion say aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Bill to be reported. Mr. Chan Chun Sing.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to report that the bill has been considered in committee and agreed to without amendment.
Third reading, what day?
Now, sir, I beg to move that the bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the bill be now read a third time. As many as are of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Parliamentary Elections Amendment Bill,